Clippers versus Rockets, man.
Wow.
A bizarre series, you know.
To say the least.
Yeah, man, they pretty much gave it up Game 6. You know, pretty much everybody remembers that 49-18 run.
Of course. After the third quarter, I feel like the Clippers, they were convinced that they were going on to the next round, which clearly, I mean, with all their history, you know, people were like, I've heard Magic Johnson say, you know, the Clippers being the Clippers pretty much on Twitter.
Well, that's a given, man. He's a Laker guy, so he's a Laker guy. That's a given. But pretty much that, you know, that whole series, it came out of Game 6, and, you know, Doc Rivers and Chris Paul, they've always been like, yeah, we're going to move on to Game 7. You know, I don't think they moved on from it. I think it stuck in their head. It was in there. You know, Houston, going to Houston with all that red in there, and the crowd was just live. I feel like they didn't have a chance, man.
Not a chance. For me, one thing I noticed about the Clippers, after losing Game 6 like that at home, I feel like they had too much to come back from. Like, too many mistakes that they made that they were trying to, like, come back for. And they just, I mean, after you have so many problems like that, it becomes hard for you to, like, get across that mental block that you put on yourself of you trying to prove people wrong. I think early on in the series, Houston just wasn't playing as a team. I think they just doubted themselves, and they didn't have like a go-to guy. Like, you could see that they didn't have that chemistry. And as the series went on and they came back from the 19-point deficit, they all looked at each other and they were like, you know what, like, maybe we're setting our own limits, and that's why I think was blocking Houston, that they just weren't out playing as a team completely.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think their go-to guy was Chris Paul, but, you know, he can only do so much. He's 6 foot, 185? And that's their go-to guy. I mean, if it's that what they want or not, their point guard, that's their leader. That's their leader that they go to all the time. And I mean, he's 6 foot. He can only do so much. I mean, you would think they would go to Blake Griffin, but he got shut down towards the end of that. You know, during that run in Game 6, the Houston defense was just swarming everywhere. They didn't let anything happen. Josh Smith.
I think their length came up pretty big with Josh Smith and Corey Brewer. You know, they're not like big guys, but they're long and they're very athletic. And like you were saying, I just think the Clippers bench just didn't show up. Jamal Crawford, he went cold.
He didn't have that great of a series.
He went cold. I mean, I know Austin Rivers saved them in that, was it like Game 3, Game 4 in Los Angeles. I mean, but that's a given. You know, they're at home. They should have won that game. And I mean, other than that, I think that's the only times that the bench actually came through for the Clippers, and that's what proved to be the changing factor at the end of the series. That Josh Smith had that crazy run at the end of Game Game 6, shooting like those threes, and Trevor Ariza himself in Game 7, he had like multiple threes.
Yeah, he had 6 3-pointers, I believe.
Yeah, 22 points. Also, Pablo Prigioni with the hustle. He hustled at the end of that Game 7.
That guy's in shape. Yeah. He can run around, man.
Yeah.
But so let's talk about Chris Paul's legacy. He's never been to a conference championship. What does that mean? What would you think he's developing into as a player? What is his legacy so far?
I think he will eventually get on to the Western Conference Finals. I know he dealt with like a little bit of that in the Spurs series. He was never able to get past the Spurs, and he finally was able to do that this season. So I think you can see it as a positive that he can finally, he made it to the next round and actually beat the Spurs, because even when he was in New Orleans, he got eliminated by the Spurs a couple times also. I just think we have to wait out a couple years. I mean, I know right now is his prime time, but I mean, as of right now, he's a good, solid all-star player.
Yeah, see, I think here's where I think we're at with him. And, you know, me personally, I think Chris Paul is turning into a player who's going to be one of those great players who never got a ring. And it's sad to watch because we know the caliber player of Chris Paul. He's a great leader on and off the court. He's an ambassador. But I think he's turning into one of those players who might not get a ring. And him being in the Western Conference the Western Conference, nothing's promised. I mean, you've got Golden State. Those boys are young. They can keep those guys together. You've got OKC. They can keep Westbrook, Kevin Durant. You never know what they're going to do. You've got Houston. They're solid. They look like they're going to make a run for the next couple of years. You can never count San Antonio out. They're always surprising people, no matter how old they get. Of course, when you got Greg Popovich, you can never count them out for that. I just don't know if LA will be that next prominent team, because nothing's promised. And then, of course, you got the Eastern Conference with LeBron and Kyrie. If they can keep those guys together and hopefully Kevin stays, nothing's guaranteed. So I don't know how many times they're going to get a turn to make it to the finals and win the championship. Now, speaking on Chris Paul's legacy, I still think I personally think he's the best player at the point guard position in the NBA. The reason being, he's a leader on and off the court. He's not afraid to get in your face, and he can make things happen when you need him to. But the problem with him is he's a little tentative and a little hesitant to score the ball when they need him to. Because even Doc Rivers said, "I need you to attack more.
Yeah.
I need you to attack the basket and get us points. It's good that you're passing and distributing the ball, but you're still our leader and the best player on the court for us."
And that's where I see Chris Paul different from, like, say, Russell Westbrook. He's the main guy on that Thunder team when Kevin Durant's not there. And he can go out there and change the game and put the team on his back. Chris Paul I think he's a great team player. Like, he's probably one of the best team players in the NBA. Now, for him, with the Clippers, I mean, would you say maybe he tries going back to New Orleans and pairing up with Anthony Davis? Because I know I've been hearing rumors that Tom Thibodeau wants to go to or will coach the Pelicans after he leaves the Bulls this summer. But would a team like that, like, do you see that coming?
I think Chris Paul he's in the best situation he possibly can get in right now. He has Blake Griffin. He's got DeAndre Jordan, JJ Redick. You know, he has a great supporting cast on the bench. Crawford, Austin Rivers. I think he's in the best position to win a championship, but like Doc Rivers said, all the great teams have went through these things to become great. They didn't win as soon as they got together. They had to stick it out and go through these rough times. I mean, look at the Bulls. They did it. The Celtics, the Lakers. Yeah. You know, Kobe Bryant did it with the Lakers in the early 2000s. So I think they have to stick together, and that's hard in this era because, you know, a lot of players are, you know, it's either win it now or I leave and go somewhere else. But I think he can come back, you know, stick through it and make some good offseason moves. I think, like Doc Rivers said, head coach for the Clippers, the highest priority they have for the Clippers is to get DJ back. Because, you know, his contract is coming up and he's about to be a free agent. So I think that is, of course, the biggest priority for them. But I think Chris Paul should stick it out, and I think he's in the best situation as far as anywhere else in the league. Yeah. But, you know, it's just so much competition in the West. You know, you never know.
From what I'm hearing, yeah, DeAndre Jordan, I know the Mavericks have an interest in him. And Bill Ryder of Fox Sports 1, I think he reported that during the season, DeAndre Jordan and Chris Paul sort of had like a falling out during the season, which, I mean, I think that doesn't necessarily mean that he'll leave. With the Mavericks being interested in Tyson Chandler leaving the Mavericks, he'd be a great replacement there. But at the end of the day, I don't think he leaves Los Angeles. It's such a big, it's the big market there. And they already have the fans, and, I mean, they have, like, their own little team there already. So I don't think he ends up leaving. But, yeah, as far as for offseason for the Clippers and things that they can do, yeah, I wouldn't make any major changes. Maybe get a couple supporting casts in there to, like...
Yeah, they have to find out what else do they need to get past, to get to that next level. And, I mean, you know, everybody has to do that every offseason. Because when you lose, you have to answer questions like that.
Yes.
What else do we need to advance to the next level, which would be the conference championship for the Clippers?
And for the Clippers, I mean, they had it. They were there. They were there. I honestly do think they could have competed with Golden State. I think that would have been a great series. They're there. I just think they need maybe a lesson like this to where you lose a Game 6 and that will always come back to haunt you. So for next time that you're there, you're able to overcome that.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move on to the next round. Let's talk about some Warriors versus Rockets matchup. What do you think, man? What's going on with that right there?
Warriors-Rockets, I think it'll be a great series, personally. I can never count the Rockets out as a fan of the Rockets. But I think it's mainly going to be up to the battle of the MVPs, pretty much. Like the runner-up and the MVP winner between Steph Curry and James Harden. I personally think the team feeds off more, or the Rockets feed off more off James Harden than the Golden State Warriors can feed off Steph Curry, because I personally think that the Warriors have a better supporting team with Klay Thompson and the Splash Brothers, Klay Thompson and Steph Curry. Either of those guys can get hot at any time, and once they get rolling, the whole team starts rolling on all gears. As opposed to the Rockets, sometimes they maybe just rely too much on James Harden and expect him to do everything. And I think that's the difference between those two teams.
Yeah, I love this matchup. I think Golden State would get the same taste as what Memphis gave them. As far as physicality, they're not maybe as big. Memphis isn't as big as Houston, but I think the physicality would take a toll on Golden State again. And you know, Houston they have shooters. They can score the ball around the perimeter. Memphis didn't really have that. So I think that would be a difference. And a lot of people say that this will be a sweep and, you know, they don't have a chance. I don't know, man. I think Houston could pull off the upset, man.
I think so too. I think with the different lineups that Houston could put out there can be more difficult to the Golden State Warriors than any lineup that Memphis was able to put out there, because of course, yeah, Memphis does have the great defense, and they have the all team, like the first team all defense. Was it like Tony Allen? But I think Houston just has too many like different types of players. Like they can go big and putting out Josh Smith, Trevor Ariza, and Dwight Howard, like we saw in that Game 6 when they came back. That lineup, they can have a tall lineup like that. They can have like a short, fast lineup. Get Jason Terry and Pablo Prigioni and James Harden out there. Yeah. I just think the Houston has more scorers than Memphis does. That'll be the changing factor.
Yeah. Like battle of the MVPs, man. Who do you got, man? You think there's really a competition there, or there's only? Well, of course, there's one goal, but
yeah.
I mean,
I think James Harden should have won the MVP personally, just because throughout the season the Rockets dealt with many injuries with Dwight Howard.
Yeah, let me ask you this though. Who do you? Okay, the most valuable player is so vague, and it's more than that. So, do you think Harden is the more valuable player than Curry, or do you think that Curry just had a fantastic year and they just had to give it to him?
I think it has to be maybe a little bit of both. I think without Harden this season, the Rockets wouldn't have made it to the playoffs, especially in this Western Conference. But without Stephen Curry, I feel like Golden State could have put maybe more of a fight with Draymond Green and Klay Thompson. I mean, those guys lead your team pretty much. Like you can have them and lean on Klay Thompson, sort of like Oklahoma City leaned on Russell Westbrook. I mean, what other player did the Rockets have this season? Dwight Howard was out for months, or not months, but he was out for a good portion of the season with that knee injury and multiple injuries.
Yeah. You're listening to Primetime Sportz Radio at 88.5. Yeah, I think Curry. I think it's a little bit of sexy too. Curry had the more sexy season. I mean, the 3-pointer for him is ridiculous.